للاستماع إلى راديو بلدي أول راديو عربي أمريكي ويعنى بقضايا العرب في المهجر. برامجنا في راديو بلدي كل يوم جمعة من 8 وحتى 9 صباحا في بث حي ومباشر عبر WNZK راديو 690 AM. صباح الخير بلدي، صباح الخير لكل مستمعينا.
Welcome to Radio Baladi, the first Arab, Middle Eastern, and American simulcast radio show. Radio Baladi is broadcast every Friday morning on WNZK 690 AM from 8 until 9 Eastern Time on Good Morning Michigan. Our call-in number 248-557-3300. And now, stay tuned for the best radio talk show on Arab and American issues.
The U.S. Arab Radio Network is the largest Arab and Muslim radio network in America, broadcasting throughout the Midwest region Monday through Friday on WNZK AM 690. U.S. Arab Radio features Arabic and English language programming on every topic, from health, food, and culture to government, politics, and legal issues. Listen live to U.S. Arab Radio in Michigan, Toledo, Ohio, and Windsor, Canada on WNZK AM 690. And in Washington, D.C., Maryland, and Virginia on WDMV 700 AM. You can also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, X, and TikTok. So join us every day on the U.S. Arab Radio Network and check out our website at www.arabradio.us.
Welcome, Radio Baladi listeners and U.S. Arab Radio listeners who are listening to us on 680 AM. Soon you will turn the dial to 690 AM at 825. But for right now, I welcome you to the program. Today is November 1st, 2024. We are only a few days away from Elections Day, a very historic day for the United States, where we will be electing a new president between the parties that are running right now, the major parties, the minor parties. Your vote is your voice. So before beginning and on this program, I would call on everyone who has not voted, early voted, to go out and vote. Polls are open. Early voting is now a thing in Michigan where you can go and vote early and at your designated center at your own city before Elections Day. You could also vote at the City Hall. And if you do not vote on early, you can vote on Elections Day, which is Tuesday, November 5th. Today, I have the honor of having Dr. Hánي Baواردي, who is an associate professor of history in the Department of Social Sciences, also the principal member of the Center of Arab American Studies at the University of Michigan-Dearborn. He is the author of Making the Arab Americans from Syrian Nationalism to U.S. Citizenship. Dr. Baواردي has amassed a sizable private collection of manuscripts and established oral history archives on Arab immigrants from the turn of the 19th century at the libraries of the University of Michigan, Flint, and Dearborn. I welcome you, Dr. Baواردي, to the program.
Thank you, Adil. It's nice to be with you. The honor is mine.
Thank you. So if we can get started, and this program is definitely highlighting the Arab American involvement in politics, in U.S. politics, and particularly in Michigan. And you, as a revered professor of history, if you can walk us through the beginnings of Arab American immigrants who have immigrated from the Arab world to Southeast Michigan in particular. How did they start in politics, and when did they start that?
Well, I'm not sure how revered I am, Adil, but Arab American story with political activism is as long as immigration itself. Some people find it hard to believe that it goes back to the late 19th century and early 20th century. So, but there are a lot of moving parts in talking about Arab Americans and their experience. We have to remember that we came in two major waves and a trickle in between. There were immigration restrictions from 1924 roughly until 1965 that all but halted immigration from the Middle East. But those early immigrants who came here laid the foundation for who we are and what our potential is. And they hit the ground running. They were active in politics. They organized. My book actually challenged the bulk of the scholarship that they were apolitical, not concerned with the fate of their homelands, and did not even constitute a people. All of that is nonsense that actually relies on Western discourses. The fact of the matter is they came with a very keen sense of who they are as inhabitants of natural Syria or Bilad al-Sham, Greater Syria, Syria الطبيعية. And they wanted that geographic contiguous area encompassing Syria, Lebanon, historic Palestine, and east of the Jordan River to be one independent country. So they opposed Ottoman rule, organized along those lines. An immigrant from Nazareth to Flint, Michigan, named Amin Farah, established the Free Syria Society as early as 1915.
Wow.
And the listeners who are familiar with Al-Rabita Al-Qalamiyya or the pen bond, Gibran and his friends might be surprised to know that Nasib Arida, a member of that society, and Mikhail Naima were members of that society, Free Syria Society, anti-Ottoman secret society, headquartered in Flint, Michigan, modeled after Al-Arab al-Fatat, or the Young Arab, a very well-known secret society during the period. That was a first attempt. And then when the Balfour Declaration was issued and the designs of the British and the French became known in the Sykes-Picot Agreement, which was a secret agreement dividing the area between them, they hit the ground running in a serious way. They established what's called the Palestine National League in early 1920s. And Abdul Hamid Shoman, the founder of the Arab Bank, was a member of that before he went back and launched his financial venture yielding one of the largest banks in the Middle East. But he was a member, actually. The founder was Fuad Shatara, a physician from Palestine, living in the States at the time. And that was, they started in 1919 and had their organization. But then again, that organization had to take second stage to a more pressing matter in 1925 when the Syrians revolted against the French. The result of that was the Free Syria Party, the New Syria Party, headquartered in Highland Park, Michigan. During that time, in the mid-1920s, Arab Americans began to write Congress about myriad concerns, about immigration restrictions, about the fate of Syria. They lobbied. And that society, the hope was it will have an impact on the decisions of the League of Nations, the precursor to the United Nations.
Right.
And Prince Shakib Arsalan came along with Nasib Saib'a. Those two, a Palestinian and a Syrian, Druze Syrian, represented Syria and the League of Nations at the time. They came to Detroit in 1927 and toured. Anyways, so they were active. And after that, the Palestinian revolt resulted in the Arab National League, the largest and the most sophisticated to date, but the largest ever in Arab American history, with 15,000 members in 1937, between 1937, 36, 37, and the start of World War II, 1939. Again, emissaries came representing Hajj Jamil Husseini, and those guys had chapters across the United States, and again engaged in lobbying and organized political activities. Then they suspended their operations to join World War II as good U.S. citizens after declaring that they are not merely Arabs in America, that they are Arab Americans. And of course, by that time, we were on a losing streak. We'll talk about this a little bit more, because we opposed the French and the British when those people were allied with the United States against Nazism. So that's why they had to suspend their operations. But they became full-fledged Arab Americans. A national convention in Flint, Michigan, the fourth national convention of the Arab National League, they declared that that's when the war started in Europe, when Germany invaded Poland in September of that year, 39. So they went to the war, came back from the war, and established the Institute of Arab American Affairs. That was a full-fledged American Arab activity or organization representing U.S. interest in the Middle East, but also the hopes and aspirations of Arabs in the United States. Until 1948, that disaster was too much for them to withstand, especially the massive Jewish support for Israel, and especially after news of the Holocaust began to spread. They suspended their operations once more by 1951. Then there was a gap. Then it was up to students, foreign students who came here to do what they can. Until 1967 came, by then immigration restrictions were removed in 1965, and the Association of Arab American University Graduates began to explain the Arab point of view in the Arab-Israeli conflict. And you had a new breed of people who were articulate and very smart. But by that time, the United States threw all its might, moral, political resources, you name it, behind Israel. And the Palestine Liberation Organization was marked as a terrorist organization. And that compounded our problems. But that's like an overview about how aware they were of themselves and the efforts they made to help their countries, which by that time, 1965, became distinct. Syria, Lebanon, Palestine was left in limbo, which attracted, that's where the need was the greatest. That's why Palestine is lightning rod in Arab American life. And then you have a lot of people coming from Egypt, Sudan, North Africa, other parts of Iraq, the Gulf, even fewer from the Gulf. But, they were nationals of different countries, and it became far more complex for them to see eye to eye on all matters. But Palestine remained a core issue in Arab American life from the minute they arrived in the 1890s to the present, you might argue.
So was the national issues all on their mind as far as Palestine issue, as far as their homelands? This was the number one issue for them, for the early immigrants?
It was Syria as a whole first, and then Palestine as an Arab issue when Pan-Arabism was viable, or the dominant narrative, and when Nasserite movement spread, which triggered Americans' involvement in the Middle East directly. Mm-hmm. They became focused, influenced by that. You're talking about foreign students who came in the 1960s and late 50s, the few who did. So all those things were reflected in their activities. And then after 1967, it was about direct action over there. But here, Arab Americans made a conscious choice to do what they can to influence public opinion as Americans.
Thank you, Dr. Bawardi, for that overview. If you can take us to the latest history, we would say the 1990s, 1980s, there was a huge amount of immigrants who came from the Arab world to the U.S. and obviously working even in the 60s, 70s, 80s. In those era, you had the Arab Americans working for Ford at the factories. Were those also politically organized folks, or they were just workers and they did not involve in politics?
There was always a measure of involvement when it came down to crises, and most of the crises happened in Palestine. I remember the heydays of Yaba, which is now not what it used to be, the Yemeni Benevolent Association and others, and progressive Lebanese and Egyptians, everyone pulling for Palestine in many settings. Dearborn became a hub of activities. That's where demonstrations against the Camp David Accord, which ignored the Palestinians completely, that peace agreement between Israel and Egypt. drew massive demonstrations, and the buses took off from Dearborn, from the south end at the time, Beit Hanina Club, and a cross-section of Arab Americans participated, as they did in every single demonstration, either for Lebanon or for Palestine or for Yemen. So we react in times of crisis. But to kind of step back and if we're talking about participating in electoral politics or presidential elections, the picture is not as bright because we lack the numbers. For example, in the leading up to the Clinton presidency, there was a lot of excitement about Jesse Jackson. If you remember Jesse Jackson, he ran for president. He's an African American concerned with civil rights. 10% of his total vote came from Arab Americans. As a matter of fact, I was a student at the time, and I registered voters for him on behalf of Arab American organizations. When I
and this was in 1992, right?
Before that.
Okay.
But he became very closely associated with Bill Clinton. So Jesse Jackson's concern shifted to the Rainbow Coalition. And it seems to me, my reading is that he realized that being too close to the Palestinian issue, which propelled him to national prominence, by the way. I remember in the early 80s, he made a trip to Palestine when it was very controversial to do that. And he said the Israelis shoot people in the back just like police shoot black folks in the back here. He made national news, became a prominent figure, but he knew how to finesse that. And he had a very secure constituency. But when Clinton was propelled to prominence, he was very close to the Democratic Party. He distanced himself from Palestine in order to achieve those, mega settlements about, racial discrimination from Exxon and others in the millions. So Palestine kind of dropped off. I think the best way is to compare Arab Americans to similar constituency who came around the same time. For example, Polish immigrants who came late 19th century, early 20th century, like we did. One major difference between Arab Americans and Jewish Americans, Polish Americans, Italian Americans, is that they came in the millions, whereas we came in the thousands.
Right.
Still a large number at the time, but not nearly. You're talking about 4 million Jews who came from Poland and Russia during that same period. If you do the math, their numbers are massive now. They decide elections in New York. I mean, it's not about control or conspiracies, but they're highly organized and they vote. And they are single issue minded increasingly. More and more Jewish Americans felt necessary to support Israel for whatever reason, sometimes legitimately. Others are beginning to question that now, but they were behind Israel. Let's compare Arab Americans with Polish Americans. So Polish Americans voted Democratic because they were workers, that's party of the poor, etc. Leaving American politics aside for a minute, until Reagan ran for office, Reagan was very hard on Russia. And the Poles were under Russian influence, and they wanted to get rid of the Russian influence. So they voted for Reagan. They switched their votes in order to enable him hoping that he will kind of continue pressure on the Russians, and it worked. The Soviet Union collapsed in 1989, and Poland was free to chart its own course. And when Clinton ran for president, they shifted their votes again. They went back to Democrats because Clinton was expanding NATO and took NATO to the doorsteps of Russia. That agreed with them again, and Poland actually became part of NATO. So this is the kind of leverage we don't have because we don't have the numbers. We have historic right. We have lofty, hopes of freedom and liberty, and that's not enough in real politique universe. It's just not enough. So since then, Arab Americans, through their organizations, tied themselves for the most part to the Democratic Party. But we're not a monolith. So we among us are very wealthy people who would vote Republican all day long.
Every election.
And in this election is no different. Some rich folks, for that 15% tax instead of 27% income tax, they would vote for Trump. Let's say those are small in numbers. And we'll get to the present, as you
Sure.
at your pace. But the Arab vote has never been a monolith, but for the most part, it leaned towards the Democratic Party until now, until this carnage in Gaza.
So, though the early 2000s, when Bush and Al Gore were vying for the presidency, many of the Arab Americans, including some organizations, supported Bush or George W. Bush at the time. What made that shift? Was it also the Palestine issue?
I'm not sure it was commanding support for Bush at the time, but that offers another useful comparison. At the time, it was a lesser of two evils situation.
Mm-hmm.
The Democrats offered nothing. Maybe that's why, out of anger, people were attracted to the Republican Party, because maybe they'll loosen things up and move the peace process forward. But that was a disaster, because we know what the Bush the son did. He destroyed Iraq and created a vacuum that produced Al Qaeda. He's responsible for that. But that's actually similar to the situation we're undergoing now. You have a very close election, so close that the Supreme Court had to intervene and resolve the issue. And the option that was viable for so many progressives and Arabs was Ralph Nader, who's a socialist.
Mm-hmm.
And here we are again. Jill Stein is like Ralph Nader in a very close election. So many of us voted for Ralph Nader also, which that vote alone gave the election to, you can argue, to Bush W. And the result was disastrous, because he brought with him the neocons, Condoleezza Rice and Tennant and Wolfowitz and Dick Cheney. And those guys engineered the destruction of Iraq and engineered the destruction of Syria as well. It was almost like a systematic plan to throw wreak havoc, cry havoc, and let loose the dogs of war. They knew that instability serves only the powerful, and it served them well. Altogether, the United States killed 1 million Iraqis, a country that never meant the United States any harm as a country, because one fellow decided to invade his neighbor, Saddam Hussein. So another example is Arab American organizations who kind of represented the leanings of a large constituency was the American Arab Anti-Discrimination Committee. It's not what it used to be. It's a shadow of what once was. But in its heydays, it had upward of 26,000 members. And I was, a regional coordinator for a time.
I'll ask, sorry to interrupt, but I'll ask the listeners who are listening on the radio dial to switch to 690 AM as we're coming on to the day. And Dr. Bawardi, this is an amazing discussion, and I'd like to go further into this, but we will have to make a stop for a commercial break. And then when we come back, if you can tell us more on Arab Americans in other states, possibly quickly, and then we can come and talk about the current elections, because I know many listeners right now are wondering where their vote should go. And we're not telling you who to vote for, but lay the foundation here from also a historical point of view. So we'll go ahead for a commercial break, and we will be back.
Hey, Michigan, let's think beyond the sink and learn where the water your family drinks every day comes from. Private wells and public water supplies allow homes across Michigan to draw water from different sources, like lakes, rivers, and groundwater. Tap into the facts about your home's water source and learn about your home's water quality to protect your family's health. Visit michigan.gov/care for MI drinking water. A message from the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services.
Life for Relief and Development has now been rated as one of the best charities for humanitarian aid. Life's humanitarian projects span the globe, and Life is celebrating its 30th anniversary of providing essential life-saving aid to people and communities in 36 countries, regardless of race, color, religion, or cultural background. Where there is life, there is hope. And when disaster occurs here or around the world, including being one of the first responders to the Turkey-Syria earthquake crisis, Life for Relief and Development rushes in to provide food, medical aid, and shelter to those in need. We are looking to help the earthquake victims, and we take 0% overhead on emergency donations. So please help improve these efforts. Learn more about our involvement to help the helpless and bring hope where it's needed most, and make your tax-deductible donation to Life for Relief and Development now at lifeusa.org or call 248-424-7493. That's 248-424-7493.
Are you going to start a restaurant or a grocery store soon? Do you need floor plans and designs? Call Najee Abood at 734-744-9796. Do you want to buy kitchen and restaurant equipment at discount prices? Call Najee Abood now, 734-744-9796. New Concept Products and Design, the trademark of kitchen equipment. 5% discount on all purchases of $75,000 or more. New Concept Products and Design, new location, 31185 Schoolcraft in Livonia. Learn more at www.newconceptproducts.com. Call Najee Abood, 734-744-9796.
Ziyad brand. Quality products from our family to yours. Ziyad Brothers Importing offers the finest quality products, including brands like Sultan, Kraft, Nestle, Hook, Rico Picon, Donna, and many more. Ask your retailer to carry these fine products because you deserve the very best. For more information, visit our website at www.ziyad.com. That's www.ziyad.com. Ziyad, quality products from our family to yours.
The U.S. Arab Radio Network is the largest Arab and Muslim radio network in America, broadcasting throughout the Midwest region Monday through Friday on WNZK AM 690. U.S. Arab Radio features Arabic and English language programming on every topic, from health, food, and culture to government, politics, and legal issues. Listen live to U.S. Arab Radio in Michigan, Toledo, Ohio, and Windsor, Canada on WNZK AM 690. And in Washington, D.C., Maryland, and Virginia on WDMV 700 AM. You can also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, X, and TikTok. So join us every day on the U.S. Arab Radio Network and check out our website at www.arabradio.us.
And welcome back, Radio Baladi listeners on the U.S. Arab Radio Network. This is Adil Muzib, welcoming you back to the show. Today, I have the honor of having Dr. Hany Bawawardi, who is an associate professor at the University of Michigan-Dearborn, to talk about the U.S. elections and the Arab American involvement in the elections. So before the break, Doc, we were just mentioning the Arab Americans' involvement in particularly Michigan. How about other states where Arab Americans involved in U.S. presidential elections, as far as other states other than Michigan?
Well, we talked about, Arab Americans' involvement in politics before we switched to 690 in general. And there were national formal political organizations since the turn of the 20th century, as we discussed that briefly. So there were chapters of those national organizations that were mostly headquartered in Southeast Michigan or New York. And frankly, in the beginning, it tipped towards Michigan, where there was a very vibrant community that's largely ignored in the discourse, at least whatever attention it receives is kind of superficial. But there was the New Syria Party was in Highland Park with chapters across the country, and it was concerned about the fate of Bilad al-Sham, or geographic Syria at the time, in the face of colonialism. So that was the first example. And before that, the Free Syria Society in Flint, Michigan. It had a very strong presence in New York, where the hub of Arab American life was at the time, in Lower West Side of Manhattan. Since that time, Arab Americans diffused across the country. So you have communities in New Jersey, Patterson, I think, Dallas, in Chicago, and the population in Southeast Michigan exploded after the Lebanese Civil War in 1975, making it the largest concentration outside the Middle East. And now I think Arabic-speaking people just crossed the threshold of 50% of the entire population of Dearborn. This is major. So in local elections, we do very well. As we succeed individually in business, we don't know how to fail almost, although we're not a monolith, and among us, there's a diverse incomes and what have you, especially lately. But as a group, it's a different story, to be honest with you. So we talked about the cohesion in the early days because people were unified behind natural Syria, and when Palestine was in dire needs, it became a core issue. Palestine is still a core issue, whereas in the past it solidified Arab Americans behind a major cause, or wherever the need was greatest, be it Yemen or Lebanon or Iraq. Now it's far more complex. We are members of different nation states with different orientations. And I'm afraid that sectarianism plays some role in how we see ourselves and look at each other. I don't want to make too much of it, because people unified behind Iraq, Lebanon, Palestine, and Yemen, regardless of their sectarian affiliation, for sure. But when it comes to national politics, we lacked strategy, and increasingly so after 1965 because of that complexity, and more so now than ever before. Lacking strategy means that we can be prey to different currents, political currents, or officialdom, or organizations, or candidates. You saw what happened over the last few days. Hamtramck is pulling for Trump through its mayor, and others came out for Democrats in force. What struck me the most is that some pundits and talking heads are becoming prominent, and I never heard of them before. I never met them, never knew who they were. So that's a byproduct of social media also, so that which adds to the complexity, or people who just, fake it till you make it kind of thing. So we don't have strategy. We don't speak in one voice. And we still have the same dilemma. It is the lesser of two evils at best between Democrats and Republicans. And now there's Jill Stein, just like Ralph Nader was in the Gore-Bush election, Bush W election, which was very close again. And it might be a repeat of that. It just might be, because people are angry enough. And they I'm sorry?
Where history would repeat itself again.
Yeah, just about, and it just might happen again. We might end up with Trump, who cannot get himself to say the word Palestinians. He's making all kinds of promises to the Lebanese, and Lebanese is a safe word for Arab, by the way. Lebanese are westward looking, as one article in the New York Times put it in the 1940s, whereas the Syrians are desert bound or something Arabic and suspicious. But Lebanese is safe, and not to forget that his son-in-law, I believe, is Lebanese, Boulos.
Right. Yeah.
So he's appealing to that. So Lebanese people in general are not a monolith at all by any means. So you have fourth, fifth generation now, and in the past, a long time ago, one person drew a wedge between them along the lines of Maronite versus Orthodox, or Maronite versus everyone else. It ran its course. It was the cause of one person, editor of Al-Huda magazine, named Naum Mukarzel, who was an agent for the French. So things are not that simple anymore. But nevertheless, because of confessional politics in Lebanon imposed by the French, whereas the president is always Christian in perpetuity, and the prime minister is a Sunni and Speaker of the House is a Shi'i and what have you, which wreaked havoc in Lebanon. That spills into the scene here in some measure, although it's very quiet. Those third, fourth, and fifth generation, mostly Maronite Lebanese, did really well, and they are more likely to vote Republican regardless, based on their income status. But that's nostalgic attachment to Lebanon. The heart of Arab American life is Dearborn, and the folks who identify as Arabs, who are also full-fledged U.S. citizens, faced with a vote. What do? So you have a carnage in Palestine. That is the biggest unifying factor for Arab Americans across the country, regardless of which state we're looking at. The same sentiment runs through Arab American life from New York to California. You couldn't find communities who can ignore what's happening, but they're reacting to it as best as they can, which sometimes is like playing with a loaded deck.
Right.
Trump is not making any promises except to stop the killing. We don't know what that means. Two-state solution is not high on his mind because he is the guy who is responsible for the Abraham Accord, a financial venture financed by the Emirates, whereas the Palestinians will basically cease to exist. They become hewers of wood, bringers of water, like the Old Testament says about the servants of, a higher race. And the Democrats, which is stunning, frankly, it is stunning to even America's friends in Europe that Harris or Biden, who repeated Israeli lies repeatedly, never walked back his idiotic comments about 40 babies with their heads cut off.
Right.
State Department kind of said, no, yeah, we don't think that's true, and left it at that. And it became, an accomplished fact that it happened in the minds of many people because he said it. Or the rape, which was reported in the New York Times, which was since challenged. And the reporter is an Israeli intelligence officer who conveniently got a job as a reporter for the New York Times. And that too was debunked, but it hardly makes the news. So how much impact are we making in terms of public relations? On social media, we have a lot of allies. We're doing really well on TikTok and YouTube. However, in public life, if people watching the networks, cable TV, listen to the radio, are not getting the full story or the Arab Americans' perspective on this in the proper context. So what is our impact then is the major question, and that is not clear. There was 2 nights ago, I think the Arab American Political Action Committee met, and they came up with a decision to support neither Trump nor Harris, or even the Senate race. They withdrew their support from both. So what do you do with your vote then? If you're not pushing for a third party, which almost demands, Adil, if I might propose, that the conversation is expanded to take the weight off the backs of Arab Americans and put it squarely in the American public square as a whole. In American history, this country came to a fork in the road. What do you do with this massive, massive wealth it has that God endowed it with? Coal, energy, minerals, agriculture. This is the richest country on the planet. What do you do with all this output? Wealth. Do you produce for profit and never cap incomes, personal incomes, and let the poor work harder? That's how they improve themselves and prove themselves. Or do you produce for consumption, not consumerism, consumption? Make sure there is enough bread on every table, that everyone has access to education, that everyone has access to medical attention, and a vacation, dignified life. That is not the path the United States chose. In the late 19th century, there was a major election, 1896. There was that fork in the road was then the populist challenge failed because immigrants could not see eye to eye on social issues like abortion, like prayer in schools, and it splintered them. And they lost their chance to challenge Democratic and Republican parties at the time. Again, in the Great Depression, the same thing happened. So you have Eugene Debs also previously ran for office, and then you have Upton Sinclair in California launching like a socialist initiative. They lost to capitalism big time because the American public was convinced, mostly white population, that if you're poor, it's your fault, that you cannot expect anything from your government, you just have to work harder, which was music to the ears of people who are millionaires and billionaires. I mean, few people, a handful of people, control the entire economy, from banking to coal to energy to minerals to the railroads. Those masters of industry or something like that, and they were like crooked who treated their workers very, very poorly. So where does the votes come for Trump? It is from the remnants of this kind of mindset where people were neglected, education is modest, they're not facing very bleak prospects. I mean, I took a trip to Washington for a holiday, and I drove through I think 422 or interstate highway, cuts through like a lot of cities in Pennsylvania. Right. And you can see the devastation all over the place. And on the radio, they're bombarded by televangelists that Israel is a fulfillment of a prophecy, that if you're poor, it's your fault, that I'm rich because God likes me, do what I do, or send me money, and God will reward you. So the preacher becomes a millionaire, and poor people fall for it. They send money. And that would not exist if the United States kind of dedicated its massive resources for consumption, for egalitarianism, but that takes a structural change in electoral system and in the party system. Why don't we have a viable third party? It's because the United States invested massive influence, sometimes by force, to stamp them down. Socialists and communists were killed in the thousands in this country, and race massacres happened well into the 20th century. All that is a footnote of history. So the United States itself has to look inward, not to look to Arab Americans or who will decide the election in Michigan and swing states.
But right now, that is the conversation, is that Arab Americans may decide this election because of the narrow difference between the two candidates. So even with a small number of Arab Americans, they do have that chance of saying who is going to be in the White House for the next 4 years.
That is very true, but if you believe that those guys who split, like those talking heads who, some are actually elected officials who say, vote for Trump, vote for Harris. So if you split the vote between them, they'll gain absolutely nothing because they're not leveraging their vote in a very effective way. If you want to be pragmatic about this, if you care about Palestine and Lebanon and Iraq and Yemen and your countries, You have to pool your vote and talk to the candidates and have expectation of each of them. What do you have to offer me? We're not doing that. I'm not saying that we're a monolith and we can do that necessarily and should, but that is one strategy that served Polish Americans really well when they voted for Reagan to clobber the Soviet Union on behalf of Poland, and then voted for Clinton in order to expand NATO to the doorsteps of Russia, and including Poland. True, we don't have that leverage, but in this election, we do. We do. We could have actually said to Harris, look, we'll deliver Michigan, and we can, as you mentioned. I agree with you. Give us something. Give us a statement, for example, like the United States will rethink its unwavering support for Israel. That's it. That's it. She could get votes. It's non-committal, but it's an even-handed statement. I mean, even in 1982, when the Israelis invaded Lebanon, killed upward of 32,000 Lebanese people, mostly civilians. Reagan actually stopped weapons shipment when they used cluster bombs. And when he saw the carnage getting out of hand, he told them, stop it. And they did. And he's not a very smart president. He's what political scientists call passive positive president, someone who likes his job very well but sucked at it. So he was sitting in his office and watching TV, and he saw all that destruction in Lebanon. And he said, that's terrible. How can we stop this? And one of his aides told him, well, you can, Mr. President, just call Menachem Begin, the Prime Minister of Israel, and tell him to stop it. And he did just that, and it stopped. Americans can do that. What's absent in the conversation also is the coordination, which is a big topic, maybe beyond the scope of this conversation, between Arab Americans and their respective ancestral lands or homelands, who cannot agree on anything either. The Emirates, we know where it stands. It's like squarely in the lap of Israel and America. For energy reasons, they invested in this Israeli pipeline to provide Europe with natural gas. To them, it's just like a business venture. Palestine, to them, is a business opportunity, and the propaganda is leaning towards denigrating Palestinians openly now. That's United Arab Emirates. But what about Saudi Arabia? What about Egypt? What about Jordan, which is caught between a rock and a hard place? Again, frankly, I don't know how many options they have. But you have an entire Arab world who can speak in one voice when it comes to Palestine, given the level of destruction. It's not happening. It's not happening.
Doc, we'll take another commercial break, and when we come back, we will have closing statements as far as November 5th. So commercial break, and we'll be back.
Hey, Michigan, let's think beyond the sink and learn where the water your family drinks every day comes from. Private wells and public water supplies allow homes across Michigan to draw water from different sources, like lakes, rivers, and groundwater. Tap into the facts about your home's water source and learn about your home's water quality to protect your family's health. Visit michigan.gov/care for MI drinking water. A message from the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services.
At Top Rehab Physical Therapy Clinic in Dearborn, we provide effective physical therapy sessions in order to limit pain and discomfort. Top Rehab provides physical therapy care for any diagnosis prescribed by a physician, and we regularly see and treat conditions such as stroke, TMJ, fibromyalgia, sciatica, joint pain, and more. We use a variety of pain management methods, including modalities, soft tissue mobilization, and therapeutic exercise. If you're in need of physical rehabilitation or physical therapy, get the highest quality health care at Top Rehab. Most insurance is accepted, and we're open Monday, Wednesday, and Friday 8 to 6, Tuesday and Thursday 8 to 5, and Saturday 10 till 2. Call for an appointment today at 313-846-0555. That's 313-846-0555. Choose Top Rehab Physical Therapy Clinic on Michigan Avenue in Dearborn. Life's too short to be in pain. With more than 30,000 successful in vitro fertilizations, IVF Michigan is now ranked as one of America's best fertility clinics according to Newsweek magazine. IVF Michigan fertility centers are the recognized leaders in high-quality fertility care. With locations in Bloomfield Hills and 9 other cities in Michigan and Ohio, IVF has experts in all aspects of the field. A founding member, American board-certified Dr. Nicholas Shama, is one of the leading reproductive endocrinologists in Michigan and Ohio. He has performed over 20,000 successful IVF cases, and it's helped thousands of couples fulfill their dreams of parenthood. When it's time to get personalized care from Dr. Nicholas Shama at one of America's best fertility clinics, call IVF Michigan Fertility Centers in Michigan and Ohio toll-free at 855-952-9600. 855-952-9600. Get ready for an amazing experience at Ishtar Restaurant on 15 Mile Road in Sterling Heights. Enjoy excellent hospitality from owners Ali Al-Baghdadi and Fatty Bonham, serving the best in Mediterranean food. Try Chef Ali Al-Baghdadi's famous shawarma, the best Iraqi grills and food, and the best Arabic and international dishes. Dine in our authentic atmosphere or take out. Call 586-698-2585 or check us out on Facebook. Ishtar Restaurant practices all CDC guidelines and is open every day 11 a.m. to 10 p.m. Have an amazing experience today at Ishtar Restaurant, 3625 15 Mile Road, Sterling Heights. The U.S. Arab Radio Network is the largest Arab and Muslim radio network in America, broadcasting throughout the Midwest region Monday through Friday on WNZK AM 690. U.S. Arab Radio features Arabic and English language programming on every topic, from health, food, and culture to government, politics, and legal issues. Listen live to U.S. Arab Radio in Michigan, Toledo, Ohio, and Windsor, Canada on WNZK AM 690. And in Washington, D.C., Maryland, and Virginia on WDMV 700 AM. You can also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, X, and TikTok. So join us every day on the U.S. Arab Radio Network and check out our website at www.arabradio.us.
And welcome back, U.S. Arab Radio listeners. This is Adil Mozib welcoming you back to the show. In conversations with Dr. Hany Bawawardi on elections, on presidential elections, the involvement of Arab Americans over the years. And right now, we're a few days away from Elections Day. So I repeat my message that I started with in the beginning of the show, to go out and vote, cast your vote, vote whomever you see is the best for the position. There are so many also other races other than the presidential races that will impact your life. Talking about municipal elections, talking about school boards, state house, state senate. State senate is not on the ballot this year, but those races are also important. The courts, the judges are on the ballot. So look them up, see their records, and vote your conscience. Dr. Bawawardi, we were briefly talking about the Arab American involvement in the elections this year, and that there is this movement right now toward the Republican Party, and in particular, obviously, Trump. And many argue it's because of the disrespect that the Democratic Party, or not giving anything or taking Arab Americans for granted, is what drove them to Trump, and to kind of have this kind of odd alliance of somebody who has been spewing hate against Arab Americans, against Muslims, to be supported right now by a huge segment of the population. Has that occurred in history before? Is this a new phenomenon?
I'm sure it has, because Arab Americans have had to choose between, the lesser of two evils. I think Reagan election may have been an example for some, but repeatedly Arab Americans kind of plug their nose and vote. But what is the utility of that? I talked briefly about the responsibility by the American population and the electoral reforms, and structural changes in the economy and socially to bring about a viable option, that's way beyond the scope of Arab Americans or any one group in the United States. That aside, one has to make a choice based on their conscience. You just encouraged people to vote their conscience, to do their due diligence, but to vote. I agree with you that we must vote. That is an imperative. However, it doesn't mean that we have to settle. I don't want to be too idealistic about this, but being realistic about this, we have to kind of find a way to inch forward along with progressives who are non-Arabs, who hold the key to this. Massive numbers of Jewish Americans, Italian Americans, Polish Americans, subaltern, and Northwestern Europeans, Americans who don't see viability in either party to step forward. So towards that goal, one has to vote their conscience, which says that Trump is not really he is disingenuous when it comes to Islam, when it comes to the Palestinian issue, and he proved that over and over again. Whatever promises he made to stop the killing, stop the war, and he, for all we know, he might start a war with China, and one with Russia, and start one with China. The man is adventurous, he's unpredictable, and he might turn on the Israelis for all we know. We don't know. Although politically, it will make his life a lot harder in terms of passing any legislation without the Jewish vote. And that's what happened to Obama, for example. So the excitement we had for Jesse Jackson would transfer to Obama, who was a huge disappointment. He launched, killing by drones. Thousands of innocent people were killed with his drones. He never restrained that. He abandoned Syria. He abandoned the Palestinians. He was a disappointment all around. And this is the man who rehabilitated America's image in the Arab world almost overnight when he took office. So how do we get away from that? How do we achieve results? I think it takes sacrifice. You have to do your due diligence. If you're not getting enough from either candidate, do vote for a third candidate if you feel that you're making a statement. It might be costly in the short run, but if enough Americans begin to see it in the same terms, and on the Palestine issue alone, you have more Americans, more people around the world who became in tune, more aware of Israeli atrocities, the apartheid system, and the genocide than ever before. This is an opportunity not to throw our votes behind the same people who are responsible for the status quo.
Absolutely.
Again, not to encourage people to vote one way or the other, but it is a hard choice. And sometimes you have to take a hard choice to make your message, to get your message across and hope for change over time. It might not be in our lifetime, but you have to get there. There's a horizon, and you don't explore what's behind the horizon if you're not moving forward. And
to move forward is definitely to vote. And our time comes to an end. I thank all the listeners for tuning in. And also, this will be broadcasted on US Arab Radio Network's channel. Thank you, Dr. Bawardi, and thank you to all the listeners, and have a great day.
My pleasure. Thank you, Adil.
Thank you, Dr. Bawardi. Really appreciate you.